Algo. Hey, Jennifer, can you hear us?
Me. Did you see me jump? Did you see me jump? You scared me.
I'm so sorry. No,
That's
I saw
okay.
you saying something and then I was like, I can't hear.
I'm just sitting here and then all of a sudden somebody calls my name.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to
It's
spook
okay.
you.
It's all right. I'm good.
I
Just
was just making
teasing.
sure you were awake.
Yes.
I turned them down. They had them all the way up.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. Yeah,
7:20.
right.
Oh, so if that's the case, then you gotta leave the bus earlier. Then I was gonna be late. I said, we ought to just start meeting at 7:30. For the meeting. That show up at 7:40. Oh, they were coming. Here.
Just to let you guys
Soon
know.
as Mike's
we're
plugged
waiting
in,
for the
we'll
stragglers and then we're going to get started.
start. Not that we're waiting on you, but. Oh,
These, Chromebooks that has a 9-hour battery life here.
It does not fit outside of that. Do you want to buy one?
make you a deal. Okay, here we are. Hey, Tim, Elizabeth. Okay, we can definitely get started now. Just let him, just 1 minute so they get set up and. So let's see, Linda's coming or not?
I can't remember. I thought she was.
She's traveling.
Oh, she is traveling. I'm wrong. Yeah,
Oh,
she's
she
not
is
coming.
traveling.
I
I
apologize.
didn't think she was in town, but I think she mentioned that at the dinner. Is Danny's birthday, 80th birthday or something like that? Wow. Cool. All right, let's get started.
Alrighty. Meeting.
All to order,
Yeah,
Britt?
7:04. All right. Commissioner Mahold,
Here.
Commissioner Dye,
Yep.
Commissioner Pinzner. Here.
Commissioner Duggan?
Yep.
Commissioner Cornell?
Here.
Vice Chair Reese?
Present.
Chair Williams?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Sterling?
Here.
Okay, and Commissioner Glasser is absent.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Do we have any public comment on any item that's not on the agenda this evening? Anyone out? There's no one here in person, but anyone online? No? Okay. All right, we'll close the public comment on non-agenda items and we'll move to the approval of the minutes from the October meeting. That's, it says on the agenda November 20th, but it's October.
And we had one correction so far. Commissioner Mahold pointed out Meyerton's. I put an S and it just needs to be Meyerton. Any other?
Any other
corrections?
Yes.
changes?
Yeah.
Well, other than,
Yeah.
okay,
And let's see if we can get out at 8:20 tonight too.
that was 8:20?
Yes.
Wow, Jim. Okay, hearing no changes, do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve the minutes?
Second.
Okay, take the vote, please.
Commissioner was not here. Sorry. Vice Chair Reese?
Yes.
Commissioner Duggan? Were you- Okay. Chair Williams?
Abstain?
Okay, Glasser's not here. Commissioner Pinzner? Approved. I'll put Commissioner Mahold as abstained.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Cornell, you weren't here either, were you?
These were the October one? No, I was not.
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem Sterling, I need people.
Yes.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yes.
Okay,
Okay, thank you very much. So we'll move on to our action items. We have one on the agenda tonight. It's the lot line adjustment for 750 West Fifth Street. So Britt, are you going to introduce this for us, please?
Yes. So as you know, this came before you before, just not as the lot line. We did it as the vacate of Fifth Street. So now, just to let you know, this is consideration of the lot line consolidation for Fifth Street. Now that Fifth Street has been vacated, to add it to 750 West Fifth Street, sorry. Just wanted to make a quick note that this is a subdivision process, so it is an administrative review. Therefore, it's not quasi-judicial matter. So the decision is here. Town is the applicant since we are the property owner. So town is the one requesting the lot line consolidation. Let's see, I'm not going to go through all of this, but I did want to note with the vacation of Fifth Street, according to Colorado law, the north half is automatically transferred to Jeanette Smith and the south half is transferred to the town of Nederland. Jeanette Smith has agreed to quitclaim her portion of Fifth Street and transfer that property to the town of Nederland. So for that reason, the entire vacated Fifth Street right away is included in this lot line consolidation. Let's see here. So I added the map just to kind of give you guys an aerial view and a street view of this red portion that was going to be added to it. Okay, so the town administrator, John, has reviewed the application and plat for the lot line consolidation and determines it meets the requirements of section 17-77. The application meets the definition of a lot line consolidation and the plat meets all of the requirements. In addition, the proposed lot fully conforms to all the requirements for a public zone district. The minimum lot size for public is 0. The lot consolidation will create a usable lot for the development of a child care center. And further, the lot consolidation does not affect the adjacent lots. For staff does not have any concerns with the lot consolidation. Related to the vacation of right-of-way, initially the fire department had some concerns about the engine turnaround and access issues. But after speaking to the chief, in November, he noted he had less concern with the turnaround at the corner of Fifth Street and Griffith, but ensuring that it was large enough, there was a large enough turnaround at Fifth Street and Colson is important. So no concerns from them either. And as stated above, John has reviewed the application and determined it fits. So really our questions before you today are, one, do you have any questions for me? Because I kind of ran through that quickly. And do you guys approve the lot consolidation of 750 West Fifth Street and Fifth Street? That's really it. I know that was fast, but you've seen this a couple of times. You're very familiar, most of you, if not all of you, with lot consolidation. So if you have questions, happy to answer them. But I know you guys reviewed this. So
Okay, before we start, does anyone need to recuse themselves either due to financial consideration or conflict of interest? Okay. We will proceed then. Okay, let's open it up to the commission for any questions for the applicant, the town. Anyone have any questions?
Did town actually pay the fee?
that's a good question. I should ask Rita.
Town is
Questions?
supposed to pay the fee, just
Yes,
if
I
you haven't
believe
paid it.
there was, yeah,
Yeah.
the funds were allocated. I'm just not sure how it was done.
Was there any opposition to this from any local residents?
We haven't received any feedback, no.
Any other questions at this point?
Is there any real or perceived conflict of interest in the line consolidation?
Not really. Honestly, it's a benefit to the public because it is a public lot. So if anything, I mean, it makes the lot larger. You know, obviously Teens is planning to propose building a childcare center, but if something were to happen, it's still a benefit to the town because we still own that parcel.
So regardless of what goes on that lot, it's still a benefit
Still
to
a
that
benefit.
lot.
Yep,
Okay,
correct.
okay. Any other questions at this point? If not, do we have anyone in the public who wishes to speak? I'll open it up for public comment. Anybody? Okay. Having heard nothing, I'll close the public comment and we'll go around the horn to the planning commission to see if there's any concerns or comments or before we take it to a vote. We'll just go around. Elizabeth, would you like to start? Mike?
As do I.
Okay. Tom?
I'm delighted that we got here. It just took longer than I thought.
Okay. Timmy?
Yeah, no problem.
Okay. Roger?
Yes, historically, in the last few years, we've done several of these, and it's always been a positive thing for the town and for the development of the property. So yes, I approve.
I
Jim?
want to say thank you for the clear way you put this together in the packet and the aerial view that is the satellite view, which shows the real Earth, road there and where you block that out. That's very helpful. If that could be the standard going forward, that would be great. But great work on this, and I see this will be a benefit. Thank you.
Okay. Trustee Nicole? Trustee Sterling? She's on?
Yeah, no, nothing to say about it.
No comments? Okay. Well, as Britt said, we've seen this before, and I think we've pretty much answered the questions. So if no one has any other comments, we could look for a motion.
I move to approve the lot consolidation of 750 West Fifth Street and the vacated portion of Fifth Street, and creating a new Lot 1C, Block 5, Dyer's Addition to the town of Nederland, and approval to record the plat with the Boulder County Clerk and Recorder. I move to approve the consolidation. This is the same thing as,
No, that's what
Yeah,
I
it's the
just
same.
said, to do conditions.
if there were
yeah,
conditions.
I would say with, I move without conditions.
Okay. We have a second.
Second.
Okay. Would you take the vote, please?
Chair Williams,
Yes.
Commissioner Cornell,
Yes.
Commissioner Pincenter,
Yes.
Vice Chair Reese,
Yes.
Commissioner Mahol,
Yes.
Commissioner Dye,
Yes.
and Commissioner Duggan.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Oh. I think they're back. Yep.
I also want to say thank you for putting in the language for the possible motions, because that would have been a little tough.
Yep.
Thanks to
And
Attorney
that's-
Bennett.
That's pretty standard now, which is good. So thank you. Do we have a staff report? It's not in the agenda, but
No, because
I
it
believe-
oh,
it's just going out for this next board meeting. So I'm happy to.
would staff like to have any updates for us? As a matter of fact, I know you had a meeting, you said with the internet provider. What was it,
Yeah.
Maverick?
So Maverick is still working with CDOT. We also have this like kind of sub grant that we're working with Clear Creek. Basically, Clear Creek and Gilpin are including us. It's a BEAD grant. And we will find out about funding for that Q1 of 2025, which would essentially just provide more fiber through Nederland, thanks to Clear Creek and Gilpin. But yes, essentially CDOT per usual is kind of holding things up. So no definite date yet on that, but it's still moving forward. So more to come.
So the fiber has to be laid first, obviously, before people could start to hook up to it. Is that
Mhm.
right?
But they have to have right of way permits through us and CDOT. And through the town, it's very easy, but CDOT not so much.
Okay,
Mhm.
all right.
There's been a
Jonathan?
lot going on around town. I'm happy to answer any questions you have. I
Okay,
think the biggest news is the budget was approved last Tuesday.
okay,
And it does include a lot of the things we were discussing. There was the big, I think, notable thing is the 50% reduction in force for the sheriff's office. And so Attorney Madsen has been working with their office to make sure the contract is acceptable for the town. And that will likely be brought in the first meeting in January to have that contract approved. And kind of other things that are happening around, we have re-evaluated and started working on the communication of our snow removal plan. We're working really hard to make sure that is a really responsive activity the town is engaged in. And so I've had Nikki and Josh, who are our streets manager and our parks manager, working on that document with Ned Fire to make sure that we keep emergency access open. And we're going to just start making sure we have that communication. But you may have already seen some of how we're handling snow this year, and it's a little bit just different in the past. But we're going to continue working on that. And other news, I think what we're really trying to do is just kind of wrap our year up and get to a point where we can start next year with the multimodal plan coming for adoption by the board at the next meeting. And then hopefully the comp plan, we're starting to work through that, where that'll be adopted soon. We're in a good place to start thinking about what our next strategic plan looks like. And that's something that'll probably kick off once that comp plan is adopted officially. So we'll be probably looking at that in maybe a March or April timeline. If you guys have any other questions about things that are happening, I'm happy to answer them.
any questions for town staff? Okay, all right, well, thank you for that quick summary. And we'll move on to other business. I know that town staff has been working on a continuing work on the draft for the comprehensive plan, which, oh, I'm sorry.
Let me interrupt you real quick, because I think we just had a little misunderstanding on the minutes. I was looking at that a little closer, and they were actually November minutes. It just had at the beginning a correction from October in it. You remember we did the November meeting online, and you were actually there. So I think, I don't know if that vote where you guys abstained.
Yeah, so the minutes are these are the minutes from November 20th. And in those minutes was the approval of October 23rd, and there was corrections made,
Yeah.
which I
Okay.
adjusted. So the dates are right.
Now I wonder if we had a proper vote
Yeah.
to approve the minutes for November or not, because
Well,
we
didn't really
were a little
approve that.
confused there.
Well,
So maybe we need to redo the vote on that is what I was suggesting.
okay, we can certainly do that.
Yeah.
Sorry for the
Sorry.
misunderstanding.
That's okay. It clicked with me after. Yeah, because I think you were still not at the November, but Roger was. Yes. Okay.
Leon won.
Okay. Do we want to recall that vote then?
Okay,
I think really Roger's the only one. I could make that correction that Roger isn't in approval because the rest of them were absent.
right.
Is that okay, Attorney Madsen?
If there aren't any objections, that's fine.
Are you
Do
guys?
do we
okay
have
with
to
me making
retake the vote,
Well,
Attorney
I
Madsen?
thought it was just Roger who
Yes.
abstained.
Okay,
So I will move to approve because I was there.
Okay.
Perfect. That will
Okay.
make that
Thanks.
correction.
Clear as mud.
all right. Thanks for clarifying that.
Oops.
November,
Yes.
November 20th.
So
Yes, I'm sorry, I was there.
Cornell and Chair Williams.
I guess
will
I
be-
couldn't have been absent if I chaired it, so
Will be,
yes, I withdraw my
Okay.
abstention and
Thank you.
approve. Okay. It's getting too close to Christmas. Okay, we'll go back to other business. So as I was saying, the town staff has been working with the SE group on changes to the draft that's currently, I believe, in circulation. The plan, and I'll let you kind of give us a timeline, but the plan is to put together the next, I don't know if it's called a second draft or a penultimate draft or, and that will come before us, as I believe, in January.
Correct.
Okay. And so the reason for this item under other business is to see if the planning commission could give the town staff any direction as they're working on the draft before it becomes in front of the public in January. Is that correct? You want to add anything to that?
Yeah. Yeah, the goal is if you could get feedback, it doesn't have to be tonight. We just gave this opportunity for those of you to don't necessarily have time to like write in or something like that, or this is an easier setting to bounce off ideas. But essentially we'd love to have feedback preferably in the next like week or two before Christmas. But end of the year if possible. So SE group can draft that next like official public out there draft. And they will be at the next PC meeting to discuss that, but they want to use any feedback you guys have to really create that good draft. Cause there's still some quirks that are there that need to be fixed.
Right. And I think it's important to make sure that before you do a lot of work, that we're going in the right direction. So
Correct.
I felt it was important for the planning commission to at least provide some input or feedback on that. So with that, since this is kind of a other business informal discussion, I will let anyone chime in with any comments to this point. Roger, would you like to start?
It's got 4 pages of notes here.
Well, we spoke briefly this afternoon, Steve and I got it on. So I was just, everything we're saying here, I don't want to take too much time, but I thought maybe there's a couple major things I'd just like to get a little feedback, or maybe we could even discuss that and I will write all these up to you and have, like I said, by Monday. But is there a way then that we could actually post them to our commissioner members so that they could kind of see the stuff without we can't go back and forth, but they can at least see that, oh, you know, this, I agree with that, or I understand it. So the maybe then they would comment to staff, but somehow, I, or we could just make the notes public to everybody, to the planning commission, and say, just don't respond. Because somehow we have to get just a little feedback of how the 7 of us all feel about it. That's one major
So
question.
before you're saying before the draft is,
Yeah,
second draft is put together
Right.
for January.
so someone could sit there, so weigh in on, oh, yeah, that's right. That's
Yeah. Well, of
something
course,
that-
that's part of the reason we're going
Okay.
around tonight. So
All righty, well, then I'll just start out and just see how it goes then. Some of the things are just housekeeping. My first note was though, can we review the online survey? Because that was the, they did a whole survey almost a year ago, they said. And it would be nice to see the input and some of this stuff. I had on page 16, there was the map, and there was a lot of little things like elementary school wasn't marked public, but that's just kind of housekeeping things that we could certain do. The graveyard wasn't marked public. I thought the open space and a lot of the areas should be designated open space. It just had a blank space on the map. I should even look at it. So things like that. And, so that land use map would actually be a nice tool to show lots that can be developed. If we would actually show all the different things, so the way you look at it now, there's an awful lot of space there that looks like it could be developed, but it really can't be developed. Or there's certainly questions to it. So just to improve that land use map on page 16. And actually a lot of the things I'll say too is that a lot of the things where they say to do things that it looks to me like it would be a good project or a subgroup to work to identify and make recommendations, as opposed to the comp plan. Quite a few times say you make a recommendation and it's almost like they're saying this is a fact when it's actually a very difficult question, especially when we get into the zoning. So a lot of the little projects could be identified by either the planning commission, and I know at the last comprehensive plan, we actually had an entire objective sheet come out of the comp plan with it designated all the groups, sustainability groups, different groups that were assigned to look into the issues and the questions. And I think that would be an appropriate thing again to, solve or answer some of the questions that they call strategies but then they don't, they just say it's a strategy, but we need to identify groups. And that should come out after we have the comp plan. An example would be the Wolf Tongue residential area. They talk about the Wolf Tongue area, and then there's, as we all know from the past meetings, there are areas that are right now being used residential. So that's an example of, a group or the planning commission should work on, how would that work? That we would actually take those residential building sites and actually make them and work into our zoning map so that it's equitable for everybody. Hopefully that makes sense. There's page 19, they show some examples of non-conforming lots. And I think that's a little misleading. They gave 2 examples, one on the north side, one over in Big Springs. The town has had a policy ever since the zoning came into effect in 1982 of non-conforming lots because they could not, break up the zones perfectly. So a non-conforming lot of record is a buildable lot. And in fact, a year ago, we actually even made it easier for non-conforming lots. You remember we made the variance so that they could get a variance even easier. That was a year ago December. That was one of the ordinances that was passed to, but if there still are issues with non-conforming lots, then that's something that certainly we would bring up when we start working on chapter 16 as to make zoning of non-conforming lots much easier. It's so that whole it easily could just be a sentence that we need to do a little house cleaning. And we certainly haven't stopped anybody from building on a lot of record, unless it was, way out of proportion with where it was being built. I just wanted to say there was quite a bit about talking about the density and growth and all those things, and the need for rezoning, but it does, and the fact that there was not enough multifamily dwellings, which I agree with. We all know that, but I think to actually understand, where we're at right now, it's good to know, how I word that, to move forward, we need to understand our past. And until a year ago, when we readopted and made some changes in those different medium density, low density, high density zoning district, for 40 years, it stated that these districts are predominantly single family housing. So it would help if people read this document to understand for all these years, all these zones, that was the predominant residential development of those lots, and that's the way it was. So the challenge now going forward is to try to equitably work to make how to fit higher density into that, how to work that after we've had a town that's been, predominantly single family housing. So I think knowing the past would help make transition to the future. Let's see. I think our group could certainly work on the page 20. There's a statement about the PUDs and not working it. That comes up quite a bit that don't really understand how they feel the PUD is such a negative thing. We've been very successful in, without going into long detail, about having the PUDs, and we just work that. And we really don't do PUDs here in town. A real PUD is taking large, Tim, you would know this, large areas where you actually have a mix of commercial, industrial, and you're doing a large development where you're actually mixing these uses. The only part of a PUD that the town of Nederland really uses is consolidate 40 lots into, say, 40 acres so that we can make, smaller lots, but we still take, say, if it's in a mountain residential, it's 40 acres, it's 40 building sites. So we haven't really used a PUD, the way that it's traditionally it's used. And that's because we've actually restricted it on the residential development to go by the zoning districts. So really all we've done is to consolidate the residential areas. We really haven't added increase to it. And we've used the PUD many, many times. The other alternative would be to use our subdivision, which we use all the parts of the subdivision in combination with the PUD. So I just think that we need to work a little bit on the clarity of what that statement was. and whether or not PUD works for the town.
Do we have to work on PUD as part of the rewrite of chapter 16?
You know, we certainly do.
Yeah.
It's all in chapter 16, so many of these things would be a rewrite. The 3 Mile Plan, the only one I had, well, page 26, the 3 Mile Plan said that, that the planning commission recommends that there was 5 parcels that we all chose that one night in our work session with them. And it says that we should change these areas. And I think that that night that we all worked on it, you know, we all decided that these were viable areas that could be annexed, but that we didn't say that they should be annexed. So I think
Yeah.
that's a small could for should word that would make a difference in the whole, because as we all know, as we've done in Beaver Creek and the subdivision, if you mention certain things about annexation, Ridge Road, you know, we had what, 150 people in here all yelling, you know, what are you guys doing? So, you know, something like should and could is and just to
Huge
say this is
difference.
part of a 3 Mile Plan and not something that we're absolutely going to annex is very important in a comp plan.
Plus the 3 Mile Plan gets revised or redone almost every year, right? Or
Well, by
possibly every year.
possibly by every year, yes.
Yep.
Almost the last thing here, guys, is the flume map and the heading of it that basically is the land use flume, the studies and the objectives. You know, that could almost be taken that this is going to be, you know, this new zoning map. And I think it actually should just be identified as here's an idea and a possibility. And as we, maybe not a lot of people in town have understood or we haven't publicized, that soon as the planning commission is done with this comp plan, our next project for next year is to update chapter 16, the zoning ordinance. So that's why we need to make statements in the comp plan that would be viable for going forward as we rewrite, you know, or work on doing the right thing on chapter 16. So the zoning ordinance. So I to actually have a map that basically that's a zoning map. To actually have that zoning map there and saying, well, here's what needs to happen, and then try to sit down and work, well, how do we make that work? So I question that maybe that just needs to be an example, and some ideas certainly come out of it. The flex are good, but certainly there's nothing there even in the flume talking about, even in the draft about the mixed use and how we really haven't, it mentions Kathmandu, and that's about the only one, but there's we have lots of commercial space, and over the years, and that was, I think, the year 2000, that we introduced mixed use into the zoning idea. And other than the Kathmandu, those are the only 2 developments that have actually used the mixed use. And that's one really viable way to get additional housing. And we can certainly look and make that even easier. You remember any other ones, Tim, other than those 2? Those are the only ones that use mixed use. And we certainly brought that up in the last comp plan, and really that's the only example where mixed use has been used. I think that's really it. Under the housing there, I think overall the housing study, oh, I know. Under housing, another example, which I've been trying to harp on, is the strategies, and they give 20 strategies. And if they would just introduce it as opposed to saying, here's 20 strategies, it would be, you know, 20 recommendations, you know, to work out a strategy to have, you know, work these things out. But the strategy shouldn't be you know, you need to do this. The strategy should be that we need to investigate the best way to make this idea work or not work for the town of Nederland or for, you know, the area, whatever they're speaking of. But that was my only real issue was, again, that these should say more that these are projects that going forward we need to work on, as opposed to saying, you know, these are strategies that you need to adopt.
You don't
That's
think
all
the
it's-
term strategy leaves it open as
Well,
something we're
That's
we're
what my
investigating?
opinion, or
Yeah.
clear that it is, yeah.
Okay.
Well, I think strategy is okay, but to investigate or to not to make it sound less of an action item.
There you
Right.
go.
Yeah.
That's a good way of saying it. Yeah, I have hardly a high school education, so I have a hard time saying which words to go. But I want it to be clear as opposed to a mandate as opposed to, you know, the town decide this is what we want to do.
So less directive.
Less of a directive.
Yeah, gotcha.
Well, it is a strategic document after all. I mean, it's not a tactical plan.
Well, thank you for your patience.
Okay, so you'll write those up and send them to town staff. Okay. Okay,
I had a
Before-
real quick
before we-
clarifying
Oh, sorry.
question for Roger, if that's okay.
sure. Go ahead.
Roger, you had mentioned like in having more of the mixed use. And I just wanted to clarify to make sure I'm understanding this correctly, but in that future land use map, it says downtown core mixed use. It says neighborhood mixed use. And then also as a part of the flex by definition was also sort of mixed use. So were you saying that it wasn't enough or that you hadn't seen the mixed use definitions used?
No, I think that map, I don't mean it there. I just meant in their discussion, more in the discussion, they just didn't brought, you know, there's not enough. They certainly go into ways of us to do higher numbers. I would just like, that would be more just as a statement saying that the use of mixed uses, or even the statement that in the past it hasn't been used, but here's a very viable way of doing it. So, yeah, I think I just wanted to see more of a statement that that's an opportunity that hasn't been used.
Okay. Okay, but you were fine with in terms of it, because you were fine with it in the number of options for
I
like
think-
downtown core mixed use, neighborhood mixed use, and then the flex, which all are mixed use zones.
Well, I went and got off. Well, you know, maybe it's something, let me describe that a little more and I will email it with the Brit when I do that up there. But
Okay.
I think, so to answer yourself very quickly without, I said, I'm thinking of speaking of the mixed use in the actual commercial area use that as it exists right now. If we would get into where they go into flex or some of the other areas like say which would be, Sunnyside right now. Yeah, I think that's a reach to say that, you know, some of these things could go into some of the other zones. I guess what I'm really saying, Nicole, is that this needs to come out as we reevaluate chapter 16 and update chapter 16 to zoning. So other than that, all ideas are good, but just saying that it needs to be dependent upon how we would work on chapter 16 to complete that and how the planning commission and the community feels it should go. As opposed to just saying that certain areas, would be flex right now. Excuse me, would be that mixed use. other than where we are right now with commercial use. Hopefully that makes some sense.
I can add
Okay.
some clarification. I was going to say, I think what he's really saying is there needs to be more in this document stating that this has been a use, and I don't think it's really been taken advantage of in the past, this mixed use option. And so like getting that across, maybe in language that this option needs to be, this is an option. It's a really good option in some of these areas. I think that's kind of what he's getting across, is the language needs to be there too, not just the mapping.
Or Nicole, I'd be glad to just sit down with you one-on-one or talk to you, but now I got the map up. Yeah, it wasn't very opportunity. I'm not certain where exactly there were saying that the, neighborhood mixed use, yeah. No, I
Okay.
think I think
Well-
rather than discuss and say that here's a place, because that'll give people idea that they're allowed to have, the neighborhood flex use right down there, say down First Street. And I know that we've actually tried to do a higher density down there. And boy, we had 200 people here a few years ago saying, you're not going to increase it. So that's something that needs to be worked out. You just can't put it on a zoning map and say, this is the way it needs to be. We have to take these ideas, and it's going to take an entire year to look at each neighborhood. And it's going to take time and to work with groups to change zoning. It's not so easy just to say, hey, we're going to just change the zoning of where you live.
Yeah,
That explains it.
well, that map sort of implies this is what the zoning map's going to look like. That jumped out at me when I first looked at it as that this is what it's going to look like, as opposed to these are areas where, for example, mixed use could work or should work. And I think that came out of the housing study too. I think they mentioned areas where mixed use could certainly benefit the town and so forth. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's where that came from as far as that flum. Is that correct?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think is just so that we have some clarity and direction, is what Britt suggested that there be introductory language that kind of expresses that this is a recommendation based on
Right.
their initial analysis, but that further investigation is warranted. Is a statement like that at the beginning of that, right? In the beginning right there, is that something that we would find acceptable?
I stopped right on the old firing line, didn't I? Yes, I'm struggling for the right words to put here, but, I think Steve, you just said it. This would have looked like this is a zoning map that's been adopted, as opposed to which I think I said at the very
Yeah.
beginning, as an idea or something to work towards. But here's a concept that should be part of a discussion.
Right.
I see. And so what you were talking about, when we get into doing chapter 16, we're going to have it here in a public meeting. There's going to be an opportunity for the public to come in and give feedback or
Right.
opposition. And where this possibly, if somebody looked at this document, they might say, okay, this is going to be the approved new use for these areas. Maybe we could change the title of that, instead of future land use, to potential future land use, or something that couches it as, and maybe even something in parentheses, not approved, something like that, that, we will, and then something in the language that says this will be investigated more in detail through planning commission meetings and the rewrite of chapter 16. And all of the public will have an opportunity to voice opinions on that. Is that kind of what you're saying?
That's absolutely what I'm saying, but
Right.
you might even take it that there shouldn't even be a flume. I mean, there should be chapter 16 ordinance before you have a zoning map.
Well,
One thing I think we should realize is that that map is based on real analysis. That wasn't just like a thrown, they really did look at like a lot of best practices in zoning there. And I think like it might be worth saying this is a recommendation based on what could, I think you had kind of said what could work,
what could,
but this needs to be interrogated by the community to make sure that it's within the,
Yeah.
because I think we want to make sure that we recognize that that's not just like an idea that they just drew. It's based on
Yeah.
all of this analysis
Yeah.
that was done.
because it doesn't really say that. And
Right.
when you
Right.
look at it, so
Perhaps
maybe
that
a
could be
first step,
shared.
or this is the first step of the Flume tool or whatever. But just to put something right up front in that text that puts it into context, I think is what Roger's
I think
saying.
that's
I
what I
think
was trying to say that, yeah.
it
Maybe
makes
like a
needed.
statement,
Just like you would look at the 3 Mile plan and someone say, oh, they're gonna annex this property.
and it doesn't have to happen. That's the other thing we can put in there, that this is a potential
Yeah,
outcome,
potential.
but it may be that no zoning occurs or no rezoning occurs or something I think we can craft a statement for you
Yeah.
I think also, Roger, one of the things I heard you say a couple of times, could and should, and like language like that, and just making sure that we represent that this is a recommendation. I think we can tighten up that language a little bit more to make sure it's clear that this is a recommendation based on analysis, but that,
Right.
the community has to come to consent, through your work that will be implementing these things. And, we may not achieve not everything in there is going to be achieved as a goal.
Right.
I think we can do that.
Perhaps an appendix could also be included with some of the background analyses, or at least where some of the data was driven from, or even for looking at the future land use key. Like, I'm struggling with the distinction between parks and open space and public. And I'm not sure, like, if we could have some definition of that, or where because I'm seeing spaces that, to me, I always viewed them as parks, but they're listed here as public. So I'm not sure what that means, or how these labels were arrived at.
We can delineate
And-
that further.
Yeah. Well, and so Elizabeth, do the definitions like right before the FLUM, before the future land use map, those weren't clear enough?
So if you look at the one that's labeled public in the Sunnyside neighborhood, I think it's the area that is outlined as the Riley Park. And the public definition label here says like parking lot, museum, library, town facility, where to me, that's just an aspen grove. That would fall under parks and open space, I think, but I don't know if I'm just reading it wrong. But do you see the big blue mark in that Sunnyside neighborhood?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think that's parks and open space. But again, I'm not 100% sure.
There's also been, what a park is in Netherlands is a question.
Right.
That's been
Yeah.
something we've been interrogating for a while. Like I think those terms may need to be defined through a larger process too.
I mean, it has Riley Park on a sign in the area on it.
We did, if you remember, there was recently a survey of town-owned properties to look at where affordable housing may fit. And in the course of that work, Britt and Attorney Madsen found a significant history of kind of a conglomeration of different agreements that made open space, and parks, park, but we don't really have a formal, we don't really have it could be formalized better and those definitions could be clearer. And I think we could work on that.
Yeah, or an appendix of
Mhm.
some sort.
Yeah, I think it's important to note too that these parks are on public land, but yeah, it should be defined like this is public land and this portion is park and this portion is open space and this is an easement. Like that, that like a conservation easement, things like that.
Yeah, elementary schools that have a combination
Of all,
like that.
correct.
But public is the zoning part of it. That's what is on that map, as opposed to having parks and everything like that. But yes, I think the definition would clear up this
Right.
confusion.
Well, and to be clear, public means municipally owned.
Yeah, thank you
Yeah.
for that clarification. I think that's helpful.
Because elementary school
Yeah.
would under that definition is, it's public, but it's not controlled by the town.
Well,
But the
so-
land itself is still not owned by town? John?
I didn't think so, but I might be wrong.
Not, I don't think the elementary school is. No, I think that's Boulder.
I'm pretty sure it's BVSD.
Yeah.
But that could be
Okay.
a public entity.
Yes.
Just not by the town of Nederland.
I have one other question about the plan, but do you prefer that I send it separately or that we just mention it now?
No, just mention
Happy
it.
to write it in the,
Okay.
yeah, I'm creating a notes section.
The section on the ADU, policy recommendation that the ADU be allowed to be built prior to the dwelling itself. I was just hoping that there could be some justification or explanation for why that would be an advantage.
We actually already did that. Yeah, I think that's one thing I call in this. So we have already done that, and really it's just an ADU typically historically has been smaller. And so it's less building cost. So someone's able to build their larger home within a longer time span and be living in this ADU is how it was originally looked at. And we added code language that primary structure must be built within, I think it's like 2 years or 1 year, something along that lines. I can send you the direct
It had to be started, right?
language. But yeah, a lot of people were just able to build this smaller structure, but needed a little bit more time to kind of
That's a lot of
get
time.
plans and yeah.
It's usually 6 months.
Not in construction time.
I thought we saw that one that it was redundant.
Well, but the idea is your neighbors don't want something that's like 2
Yep.
years in the making.
Well, it'll be, well, that's the standard. That's what we have. So unfortunately, you weren't on the planning commission when we did many meetings with the housing study. And we talked about this ad nauseum. I'd recommend you go back and look
Okay.
there and you'll find the information in there about that. But yes, the main thing was that we were looking for strategies to promote additional building. And one of the things that came out was, hey, when we have somebody who, you know, wants to build a house here or the person who's the builder, you know, who's doing it, we need to have, it would be very helpful to have, say, a smaller, you know, 150 square foot building or something like that we could build while we're going through the 2-year building process. And I think you probably ought to go talk to somebody like Valentine and find out how long it takes to get a house built, because 2 years is pretty standard.
I will, I'll send you the minutes, the language, and we can chat about it further. But yeah, I'll make sure to send everything to you so you have that.
You know,
Thank you.
Yeah.
well, we actually determined that it was kind of redundant. And Tom, remember, the three of us all came to that conclusion that it actually was a misinterpretation. Because you could, an ADU, you could build a 500 square foot building and live in it forever. That's a building and that's what's allowed. So yes, if you went and do 100 square foot shed or something, no, would be, but remember, we actually worked through that really wasn't a roadblock.
Yeah, it really is not. I think we still defined that in the code. I think I need to look at it, but essentially, if you don't end up building, that becomes your primary structure. But as soon as you pull that permit and start
we just-
building,
yep.
your timeline starts, and it's
Well,
got to be
it's-
done. And there is enforcement on it. That was something that, because we didn't want these like unbuilt structures as well.
Or half built.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Does that help?
Thank you for the
Yeah, I'll still send you
clarification.
it.
Yeah, I
It's really
appreciate it.
helpful to
Thank
see the back
Right.
and forth.
Like Jim said, we had lots of ad nauseum discussion over this to come up with the ordinance.
I wonder, just to revisit, and I think I'm kind of hearing, after hearing Roger go at this from 5 different directions, that is this something where if they see this, if a developer was to look at this comp plan and see the future land use map and go down here and see the industrial zone currently that is not zoned for housing is now listed as flex, and automatically think, okay, this is great. I'm going to be able to set to build here some kind of mixed use stuff or flex, because this is what the town is saying that they want. You know, and so I'm wondering if, is that what your concern is? Because this doesn't say not adopted yet or potential or something like that on here, right on the map, that somebody could just quickly look at this map and say, oh, great.
Without
That's a
reading
good
the
plan.
text.
Yeah.
Exactly. I feel like we're getting a little ahead of the cart and ahead of the horse.
One,
Once we actually, this flume is good, but then once we actually would work to update chapter 16, then we can melt this map to chapter 16, which uses are allowed in which zones, then it becomes
And adopt.
just like our adopted zoning map.
I have an alternate suggestion. We have been talking about at the staff level that we want to have regulatory authority added to the introduction of this of this whole comp plan, so that it says this is statutory authority for a comp plan. This is what it is. This is what it does. And I think one of the things I've heard as you guys have talked about this issue, even in draft one, is this, you know, could, would, should kind of language, shall, you know, can, you know, how regulatory is this document? And we know it is not. But in the introductory section, were we to add more language that's specific about the regulatory authority of the plan and how it's intended to be used, would that be a good overarching umbrella to cover these kinds of bases so that people understand this is our best information right now based on what our consultant said, but we have this further work and everything in here is kind of a suggestive, like to kind of set that work plan for the next 10 years. Because you'll find, you know, there's no doubt there's things in here that in 10 years, when we look back at this, we'll say that was a unreasonable thing. You know, there's going to be those things. And I'm just wondering if we just cover it in the introduction and say, you know, maybe at some point in the next, you know, you should do a comp plan. I think the state's going to eventually require it every 3 years. And when we do those updates,
geez.
so, you know, we're going to have that process built in here. So I'm just wondering if we build that in from the beginning so that everything is kind of covered under that umbrella, or if you'd rather have it specific to every piece in the plan.
No, I think that'd be really good,
Okay.
especially the recent edits at the top here kind of gets there to start with. But I think what you're talking about is this is what it is, this is how it's to be used, and this is when it's likely to be looked at again. So you put some sort of parameters around everything that follows. And right on the first page, it says, you know, in this revision, you took out some redundancies. I don't want you to have to say it every chapter. And when we take out redundancies, let's leave them out.
The only concern, Tom, is that someone's going to flip open. I think that was what Roger was alluding to.
Right.
Someone's going to flip open to the map without reading any of the text and misinterpret what that is, even though it might have been described in the beginning of the comp plan.
It's true. It can be taken. We've got one annexation map that we were beat over the head for years because it was pulled out of something with no caption. It's like using charts with no legends on the axes to tell you what it is. It'll always be taken out of context, but anybody that's in a worthwhile discussion will say, where did you pull this from? What page? And what's the context? I think anything could be out of the map could be taken out of context. I'm not too worried about it. I just don't think you admitted it into discussion in isolation. Where did this come from?
But there isn't any harm in changing the should to could, right? I mean, I can help
Yeah.
edit and go
Well,
through that and.
I'm kind of thinking that from the staff perspective, what we need is direction that we can turn into a meaningful change in the document. And if we had direction along the lines, what you just said, like we can continue to work. This is kind of what happened from draft 1 to draft 2. And I think there's been recognition that we're getting there, but we just need to keep working on that. So if we continue to work on that language bit and then we strengthen the section at the introduction, is that a acceptable outcome to kind of get to this next draft level where you can look at it again? And we can continue that work always. But, you know, I think what I'm hearing is we need to be careful about language, and then we need statutory regulatory authority and like what this plan does and how it is intended to be used so that intent is clear. Because that's always what's the difficulty when you look at a plan in 5 years is what was the actual intent. And I think we can clarify that with those two strategies, but if there's further ones, we can do that as well.
Yeah. Because what you've done so far really has helped understand what this document is, as opposed to like I said earlier, a tactical plan that says you will do this, 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 and this. Even in 2 years, it turns out that that was the wrong direction, you know? But to explore each of those items is perfectly fine, or strategies, I think is perfectly fine, because then that gives us some marching orders within the planning commission, for example, to look at, you know, various strategies and what can we accomplish under that strategy and how to do it.
I think
I agree with you, John. Yeah, I'm good with that. And also one of my biggest things tonight was actually to get a little feedback, because I don't want to be one of 7 people
Yeah.
that feels this way. I mean, I realize that we have to do rezoning, but I just didn't want people to assume that, well, it's all done. You don't need to do anymore. There it is, accept that plan. So exactly what you said to start, you don't have to repeat it all the time, but
Well, I want to make sure your intent is clear.
Okay.
And like, I think you really made a lot of really good comments about clarity we can bring to that, so that, because I think, like I said, I really think anytime you look at an older plan, the hardest part is figuring out what the people who wrote it were trying to do. Like, you know, why? Because you can read it and it's just, you know, over time things change. So if we can add that clarity, I think that's something Britt and I can communicate to the team. And what we would really like is this draft 3, when we bring it to you, I would really like it to be in close to final form. So you guys are going through it and maybe we got to dot a couple I's and cross a couple T's, but for the most part, I want to get this tight.
I think there are 2 different categories of, well, I guess, things that the plan does. You know, one is describing the current state of things, and the other is where we might go from here. And I love the idea of removing redundancies and putting an explanation, like you just said at the beginning. And I think that works very well for the latter category of where things are going. But I think it's more important with the capturing the state of current affairs to have that as precise as possible. And you know, maybe a little bit of repetition, but not much. But, and I know this is a work in progress, but there are a couple of inaccuracies that I guess if it was in the final version, it would be a little concerning.
Yeah. Well, draft, anything like this requires drafts. And I think Britt,
of course.
Britt, you're taking notes. Do you feel comfortable with the direction that we're receiving so far?
Yes, but I would say if you have specifics
Yeah.
that you want to mention or email me, that would be
Absolutely.
more helpful.
Yeah, please, everyone, do that.
Yeah, just because we're, staff is reviewing, you know,
Yep.
multimodal and that all at the same time. So sometimes stuff definitely gets lost.
One other question, you guys, that I'd like to just interrogate is when you think about this document, the other thing it does, it tells you how we are thinking about things. And the last comp plan, it was a sustainability framework that was sitting on top of everything. That in this document has changed to resiliency framework, and it's similar but different. And I think that one thing that I would appreciate is if you guys just talked for a minute about that framework, because that should really be guiding your decision-making process. And I want to make sure you're comfortable with what it's asking you to do there and how we would be approaching these things. Because when you come to a zoning conversation, it's equally important what framework we're thinking about that from as what, you know, the actual areas on the map will be. And, you know, sustainability is always going to be a part of that, but we've talked about resiliency in terms of housing, resiliency in terms of keeping this community a real community, all of these different things in there. And I think that this is a really good time to be having that conversation too about, is that framework something you guys want to use as you think about these issues in the next 10 years?
Yeah, I think the change in framework, they wrote it up really well, so you could understand why they did it and how it was going to be incorporated in future pages. I thought they did a great job on that. It makes a lot of sense to me.
And that they also did a good job of putting each concept of resiliency into the strategies, you know, or they call it objectives, I guess. I like the way they did that because that's the tie-in that you're talking about, I believe, right? So for each of the strategy, this is the resilience objective. That part I think is very good. I don't know what others think, but.
One of the things that I think turned out really well was the table 3, the strategies are just laid out in a way that really makes sense. And then it dives through so somebody can keep this page out and use this as the table of contents and flip through. I thought I had a question on objective 10 versus 13. It looks like there's some redundancy. We're talking about protecting historic assets. I don't know what they are, versus promoting the renovation of commercial buildings. Is this pretty much the same thing?
Could be. I will tell you, background wise, we don't have the most complete historic district or something in Nederland, but there are assets, Bryant House, Gillespie House, Town Hall, this building, that are, it may be the PI, like things like that there could be additional historic preservation funding for that could restore them if the owner wanted to do that, or if they're town-owned properties and we wanted to do that. And I think that on the commercial property thing, then you have buildings like maybe the BNF, which isn't historic, but maybe somebody wants to do something there, or maybe, to other properties in towns that just don't have that distinction. I think that what the intention is to say, we take care of our infrastructure in terms of buildings, but then we also think about our history, especially, as limited as our kind of physical space environment that shows us our past is. Like, do we go through preservation efforts for them, or do we, or is that something that we really want to be focused on? And so I think that might be a good discussion point for you guys too, but I think that was the intention.
Okay, then I would suggest putting these two next to each other and then saying example, or put an example of two of each. So that otherwise it looks like it's hard to tell it's something different. I guess I wanted to go back to something you asked about, Jim and Roger. I think that the industrial zone was addressed pretty cleanly, and it says this is just something we've got to look at in fairly early on. But those are two main things. And then I guess one of the big takeaways that came out of this is lot sizes will need to shrink if we want to infill. And that came through loud and clear. And then affordable is going to be use by right. That's a pretty big change. And the fact, I think, and then when we talked about streamlining the permitting process, what does that mean? What are the impediments that can and would be removed under this streamlining?
Well, that's actually a state mandated process through Prop 123. We're required to do certain things to make sure that we prioritize the development of affordable housing projects if they come. And so these are some of the things that we agreed to when that was originally done. I don't know that there's starting to be more clarity around what that means, but it's not fully fleshed out. Like, for instance, does an affordable housing project get to jump the queue of anything else that's in development? And that's a question that there is. And I think it's being developed very quickly because everybody has to answer this too. But I think in our initial review, it doesn't appear that there's anything in our process that's artificially slowing things down too much. So I think what we need to do is just be very aware of what's happening at the state level and really making sure we're aligned to any planning process we're required to engage in.
Yeah, and also note that we did make the change in regards to, when it comes before the planning commission, if we have to hold a special meeting because we have a timeline on when we must review them, we did it from that aspect, but obviously the permitting aspect, the jumping the queue and things. But from a town perspective, we don't charge them a fee. If it has to have a special meeting again, then we hold one for them, and we streamline the process from that.
Okay.
So we've already started it, and that's a really good step. And we'll see what happens in the permitting world.
And then another distinction that seemed to jump out is that yard and bulk versus affordability. It's like those are the two ends of the dichotomy. Now, at the state level, are yard and bulk requirements becoming any more clear? Is there anything we can borrow from that?
There's a lot of people in the state legislatures who have just ideas about how that should work. And it's different in a place like downtown Denver than it is in a place like this. And I think that's really one of the big conversations that I've been having is the difference between rural and urban and mountain resort and mountain and how that all works. And, there's a lot of implications for towns that people in the legislature don't always think about, like water rights and water delivery and all of that kind of stuff and the capacity of our plant. And so I think that there's a new model code that just came out at the state level that does contemplate some of those things, and they're trying to help figure those things out. But I do think that yard and bulk and lot size are pretty critical issues in some of our zone districts. And I think that might be something, like to your point, Roger, that we want to be careful how we interrogate and make sure that that's a good community conversation. In some of our neighborhoods that do have kind of larger lot sizes, we do have non-conforming homes, like you mentioned. It's not that unregular. And like we've also recently, Britt and I have been looking at lots that have been built, maybe in the 80s, where there's a garage or an ADU that's built in the setback, or maybe even touching right away or something. And how do we deal with that? And I think we want a process for that, because I don't think we're trying to get rid of housing that's existed for 40 years that's really not impacting safety, but we do need to have something so that we account for it.
So that would go into chapter 16, for example?
I think so. I think we need to have that
Yeah.
talk about what we'll do.
Right.
Well, if I could just jump in there. So John, exactly, and maybe Nicole too. So what, just right along the lines that you just talked about, our zoning. So I think an example of what I was, now that I've got it open, I've kind of remember what I was thinking about later, but neighborhood commercial on the Flume map takes over Old Town and, up the hill here and all the way over to Sunnyside. So there's this huge diversity from 4,000 to 16,000 square foot homes. And then to try to say on a map that we're going to put that all into one zoning, that's what I meant, that we need to work on this a little bit, and the zoning needs to come with the map. Otherwise, what does that map mean? Where it just says neighborhood residential. And I realize there's some text there, but that's something that would be a project to work on. It's a good example for me.
I hear you. Britt, do you think, let's talk to the consultant in our next meeting about that issue, and let's see what we can do. Because I think we might even have to bring you a couple alternatives of what it could look like, just so we get it right. But I think I understand what you're saying. So we'll just talk to the consultant about that, and we'll have something in the draft that you can consider. So it's not, I really we don't want this document to lead in a bad direction either. So we'll come up with at least, I want to say we can come up with 2 alternatives that you can look at least, but let's see what we can come up with.
Well, exactly. But what's, okay, I mean, I'll just keep petting the dog all the time. But sure, I have the idea, but then when we talked about that, this is not, this is not an ordinance, this is an idea. And even to state that the final Flume plan will come out of chapter 16 when it's updated and completed. Just a statement like that would be.
We really want something on the map in parentheses that says this plan has not been adopted yet.
Yeah.
Something
We're
on
all-
the map that
we're-
somebody's gonna look at this and not
But then
think.
it needs to
yeah.
also reflect the updated chapter 16.
Agree.
Got it.
We're all on the same page. I think
Yeah.
we can come up with something to look at and make sure we're all on agreement.
Another conclusion that seemed to jump out of this, I was just looking at the big picture stuff, the PUD process would be the anomaly, not the rule. That we want to make this scarce because everything is clear and should sail through because we've clarified.
Yeah, you don't want the appearance of spot zoning here,
Yeah,
which would be a good thing. And I think have you guys thought about, you had conversations about this before I was here, but you have PUD size requirements and all of that, but there may be places where PUDs are, and you kind of said that, Rogers, places where it's more appropriate and places where it's less appropriate. Do we want to talk more about that, or do you want to just leave that to the chapter 16 conversation, or?
I think that's a chapter 16 discussion and
Right.
adoption. Yeah.
but at the same time, it's a matter of philosophy. And this is the philosophy of where we're going.
Yeah.
So I personally think it should be if we believe that the PUD should not be the immediate knee-jerk reaction for everything, but an exception when there's a
Isn't
lot of
that-
variances.
I thought that's
required.
what it said in the document.
Yeah, but I think what you're saying is, what I heard you say is that we won't, that we're going to push it all to a revision of chapter 16. I think we'd like to know, I think in this foundational document, what's our philosophy is, should the PUD be a rare occurrence or something that you do every time?
You could say that the intention of looking at zoning is to create consistency and all of those good things so that when people come to develop, they have predictable outcomes and predictable lots where they can build, something about development easily. And that a PUD should not be necessary because of the way that you've contemplated or that you will contemplate zoning. That could be, I think there's language that's sometimes used like that we could look at.
Good.
Yep.
I have some notes. I'll say, I said it in our meeting, but I'll say it again, the low hanging fruit, table of contents and page numbering would be excellent for being able to navigate the document. I liked that you introduced the changes that you made from the other data. That was great. And it lists what and you were saying, you wanted to make Ned sound more like Ned and removing terms like old urban sprawl, that's helpful. And people that haven't seen the previous documents, realize that work has gone into to make this a more Ned friendly document. I thought it was interesting to see that the median income in the demographics chart was $115,000 for Ned when it's 93,000 in the rest of Colorado. That really, really impacts what we have as affordable housing. I appreciate the distinction that you drew between sustainability and resilience. I think everybody looks and who was around knows that sustainability was by far the priority for everything in the previous comp plan. Everything had to be looked at through a lens of sustainability, mainly based on the current makeup of the BOT at that time. And I appreciate that you put definitions in there and say, hey, we're going to consider this, but that this isn't going to be a factor that keeps us from moving forward with some projects if need be. I kind of going to push back against you. Well, I'll save that one because that'll be I'll save that one and come back to you, Tom, on that one. Clear objectives and strategies were good. I did want to mention, I see that we're looking at, the changing in parking requirements, as opposed to what we currently have listed in here, which may be helpful for being able to build, multi-family units. And I did see a story on the news about a week ago that Denver is considering doing away with parking requirements for developments,
Yeah,
which is pretty scary.
The state is also mandating some of that too, which is interesting. We'll have to see how that plays out.
It'll be very interesting to see what comes down from the legislation about the new stuff that's going to come, because I think it's going to really force our hands on some of the things that we can consider. The affordable housing use by right, that one again got me too, and I would love to see one. Are we talking about low income housing, which is 30% of AMI? Or are we talking about 40 affordable housing, which that definition is 60 to 80% in there, and that's important difference, because affordable housing, if we're talking, I just think a lot more definition on what use by right for affordable housing needs to go in there, because boy, if it's the 60% of AMI and somebody's charging $2,600 a month for that because that fits within the definition, then boy, I think some developers could see that as a real opportunity.
Attorney Madsen, did that get mandated in the last legislative session? Does it have to be now? I can't remember if that made it through or not.
I'm sorry, which one was that?
Did they mandate affordable housing as a use by right in the last legislative session, or just multifamily?
No, not affordable housing.
Okay, maybe
yeah.
it's just duplexes. Okay, I wasn't sure. Yeah, but we can affordable housing typically, there's not a great definition for what that would mean, because affordable housing, the only real definition of that is not more than 35% of your income. But you could mandate certain AMI levels in there or something. You could make a different statement about what that would mean. And you could also, a controlling factor there might be density, because you could say, for instance, create density zones or something like that where density is appropriate and not appropriate. But you also have some lot in your code currently, like an 8,000 square foot lot can only have so many units on it. And there's going to be practical limitations for development of a lot of like 4 units if they can't meet certain affordability goals. The other thing I'd mention is an affordable housing that you might want to consider as senior housing. Nederland is very, very ill-equipped to take care of the people who have lived here for generations, and we need to do a better job of that. And so affordable housing really targets those folks too. So I want to think about if that's something you guys want to do, we need to really build a robust definition set for what that would mean.
Okay, but certainly we want to define, you know, if we're gonna have use by right, you know, on that, we want to define pretty, you know, it's more than what that says, in my opinion. And then, I also saw the future zone, future land use map where that flex area there. And I agree with Roger that that could be, you know, that people see it. Oh, it's a 100-page document. I'm going to flip to the important part. Oh, look at this. Oh, this is a great area. So something on there, I'll beat that dead horse, that says, you know, not adopted yet or pending adoption, something that lets somebody know when they look at that is not the current allowable use in, you know, those areas.
Can I make a quick statement? I think it is important just for like calming your ease. People are going to pull this anyways. I get several calls a week from realtors. What can I do with this lot? What use? You know, what am I allowed to do? How big can I build it? If it's a current building that's for sale, in commercial, they ask me, you know, hey, I'm thinking about buying this and doing an office out of it. And I'm like, oh, it's in central business district. You can't. And so a lot of people, because of the price of land now, are calling to make sure, where I think in the past, you guys have seen people buy it, think they can do something with it, come to the BZA for a variance or something along that lines, and they cannot. But I get several calls, several emails emails me to confirm stuff too. Like realtors and private landowners are not just assuming anymore, because of the pricing. And then when they go to pull a building permit, I mean, it stops. Hey, you can't, that's not.
And most of this is SRU too.
Yes, correct. Yeah. So it's gonna get, just to create that ease. I agree with you. Something should be on there, but, people are doing their due diligence in that aspect.
Well, you would hope so if they're, you know, don't want to get down the road and spend money needlessly. I also agree on the 3-mile plan language that, man, and just basically as an overarching strategy, you know, any place where you were putting something in there, try to put language in there that says, you know, I would love to see something that says, you know, this 3-mile, you know, where it had those 5 parcels that were identified, something like possible or viable areas for annexation if initiated by property owners and approved by town voters, because that's the requirement. So before, not only do they have to initiate it, but we have to have a townwide vote. So something in there that shows them that, so when the public, there are people in, you know, in Nederland that are going to pull this up and they're going to start reading, and they didn't listen. They're not going to go back and listen to this on YouTube.
Yeah.
They're not going to know the discussion, and they're going to start freaking out.
Right. Not every annexation requires a town vote. And so I want to be, we can put that in there though.
Well,
Yeah.
I would really caution about putting in the town's current regulations into your comprehensive plan. So identifying what is required for annexation today in your comprehensive plan, that could change. It's not guaranteed that there's always going to be a vote. And I would be concerned with any inconsistency if the regulations did change.
I must be misremembering. I thought when we talked about that annexation plan that anything that came to the BOT, if they agreed forward, that it had to then go forward to a townwide vote.
No, there
Unless
is,
it's municipal owned.
yeah, and there are exceptions. If it's a smaller size
Oh.
parcel, it doesn't have to go to a vote. If it doesn't create a, you know, a zone, the potential zoning isn't a greater density than the boundary, than the property that is adjacent, then it doesn't need to go to a vote. There are exceptions to the vote requirement.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. I appreciate that, and I'll stand corrected. Maybe it can say something like, potential viable areas for annexation, future annexation or something like that. Maybe it doesn't have to go into detail. And I take your meaning. You're right. We could change those rules here and then that makes our language outdated. Okay. And then the last one, I'll go back to Tom on the PUD process, where it's talking about simplifying this process. I understand there's going to be some stuff forced on us by the state. But I kind of find the PUD process as a valuable tool to be able to kind of shape, what we're going to do with town. And so when we talk about making it rare or the exception, I go back to thinking of all those proposed projects that we got from Ron Mitchell and looking at that and think how much work we would need to do with him through the PUD process and how bad it would be if it was like, okay, you could go ahead and build this use by right because it's rare and accepted.
Well, I think, Tom, I'm not trying to speak for you, but I think that what we would like to do, what we want to do is you want your zoning to be consistent all the time, like the underlying zoning of anything. There may be other things that come up in this space. One of the things that we need to talk about next year is the potential for either an overlay district or new design standards in the downtown area so that we can, our current design standards are not adopted. And so we really need to look at that process and determine whether there needs to be an overlaying zone district or some other kind of design criteria for what happens downtown. But that being said, I think that one of the things that we want to remember is that in general, if you guys really are thoughtful about the zoning map and you get it set up correctly, things in general should work. And like you shouldn't see, like say I'd love to buy a house in Nederland. I buy a lot and then I decide I'm going to build my log mahal, like my cabin Taj Mahal thing. And I want to build it lot line to lot line, up on Doe Trail or something. That you don't want me to have like to sneak into the PUD process, even though that's a really bad example. Like you don't want me to sneak into a PUD process so that I can change the underlying zoning and do whatever I want. But using a PUD process so that the town can achieve greater goals than it can on its own with just regular zoning for a lot that's appropriately sized for like, a community good thing is a really good thing. And I think in the example you said where you do have a larger lot, that's a good reason to do that. Or maybe at some point, there's a lot of reasons you might do that. But I think, is that kind of what you're saying, is you want to have consistency so everything kind of works the way it's intended to. And then when you do have those larger opportunities, which if we're, we only have, how many opportunities are there for a PUD that are big enough? I'm not sure, but I know it's not a lot. So, there should be, maybe we don't really have to clarify that language, but we just, as we go through the zoning process and this resiliency and thinking about that, maybe the goal is, okay, we know we have these little, you talked about the Wolf Tongue residential area, these little things that just need to be dealt with here and there. And if we address them all, we have this really great underlying zoning. And then when we do have a transformational project, we use that PUD process and we really make sure that it works for the town and it fits whatever the criteria for that project are, so that you guys have some really good criteria to approve on. That's.
So you're saying the PUD process is kind of more like a check and balance or a safety net or something that if you use it, if you need it, but it's there.
Right. If you have the
protect
right
the
lot.
the town.
Yeah, I'll give you an example of my previous work. Idaho Springs doesn't have a dark sky ordinance. And so when a PUD comes, typically that's something that's added. Or potentially it could be a structure that maybe Brick can use to increase density so you get affordable in a mixed use development or something like that. Or maybe there's like, things with right of way or something. There's a lot of reasons it could work and be great. But by and large, if you develop everything in zoning so it is functional for its intended use and everybody agrees on that,
Mhm.
it just makes the development process, it also makes it cheaper because going through a PUD can be pretty expensive.
Well, it's, so. But your discussion is that, yes, there's only, I see 2 lots plus the Forest Service would have a PUD. But I think your example, so everybody forgets, in the ordinance, I think it's number 2 of the 4 points of the PUD, that if it's in residential area, the underlying residential density applies. So compared to other places, people use the PUD for a density increase. In Netherlands, it cannot be used. So basically, the only thing the PUD does, there's I went a lot up there towards the northeast of our town. It's on a steep side hill. There's 11 acres there. And so someone could actually, I mean, if we're right today, did a PUD, they could build, some little units right here. Long stinky gulch down there, and you could put in some housing there, but you cannot go up the rest of it. So that's basically all the PUD in Netherlands has ever really accomplished, other than we've had some in Old Town and some different areas.
Right.
But really, the idea for the larger subdivisions, the Caribou Ridge, the Mud Lake, Indian Peak subdivision up there, yeah, we used a PUD, but that's where you see, instead of 30 large lots, you see 30 small lots, and then you see open space. And so basically that's all the
Yeah,
PUD.
I'm just
did.
saying, it gives you a way to look at the context of a project
I agree.
and just make it work. And so I think, you don't want to have to do that on every
Right.
lot ever.
Yeah.
And there's only a couple lots left to
I think we just lost volume.
We did, yes.
Can you guys hear us?
They look frozen.
Okay, yeah, I think they're frozen. Help us. Help us. I'll text John real quick.
Okay.
Sorry, everyone. Just hold tight. I just called John and he said that they're working on it. So something must have critically went down. The winds are pretty bad, so maybe.
But I'd be happy to talk to you about it and what else I've heard.
Yes, that would be awesome.
There you go.
Sorry, it went off. I don't know what's going on with the system. We have bad luck, well, me
Yeah.
specifically,
Yeah.
but, yeah, I think that might be good to
Yep.
bring in SC group and
Yeah.
chat about that more.
Yeah.
Hey, Britt, are you speaking into your microphone?
Yes. Ish.
Okay, it's
now?
kind of hard to hear you guys. Say it again.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, now I can. Okay, thank you.
I'll turn us up a little bit.
Okay. Would you like me to repeat what I said, Nicole?
Yes, please, because we were
Yes.
just knocked out for the past few
Yeah.
minutes.
Yeah, sure.
Speak into your mic.
Yeah, right in their mic.
Right here. So
There you go.
what I was saying was that kind of in my day job, there's been a lot of talk with the incoming federal election or the new federal government about revising documents and planning documents so that phrases like climate change are more palatable to some possible hostile government entities. Basically, any document that can be used for federal funding, like possibly this one, there's a lot of scrutiny that's possible in the next 4 years. And I was just wondering if that was a consideration for this. Yeah, I don't
good
even know how
question. Yeah.
to do that, but
Thank you for
that's-
bringing that up. I don't think we have even,
Yeah,
that never even occurred to me at least, so.
I mean, massive ball of wax, but I mean,
Yeah.
the fear is that if certain words are mentioned in documents, that funding agencies would have the right to deny you flat out just because you talk about it, which I think is hideous and awful, but.
Is there any resources that you've been using in your job that talk about that further that we could?
Oh, gosh, I'll have to
I-
read some of my notes.
I know somebody I could ask. I know somebody I could ask in the government agencies. So
Great.
let me get back to everyone on that.
Yeah. Other than that, I don't think I have anything that hasn't already been talked about.
Can I ask you a follow-up question? When you were
course.
asking about the low-density residential,
Yeah,
is that something that you're thinking we want to change? Or, do we want to think that those as, like Old Town, I'm thinking,
oh, yeah.
like keep it as a character, like is that a character area where we want to maintain the low density? Or is there anything specific that we want to think about or?
My point was that it's currently a high density residential.
Oh, got it.
And
Okay.
then the map, it's marked as low
Yeah, the
density.
whole map's
So,
one color, really,
Yeah,
housing.
We need better differentiation there is what you're saying. Okay.
Quality control.
yeah. Great. Thank you.
Okay, anything else? I'll just sort of get another comment well, I'll just kind of sum this up. First of all, thanks for all the work you've done so far on Britt, you meaning town staff, sorry, on the document from the first read, which prompted a lot of comments. So I think a lot of things have been improved. I find it interesting that a lot of things that I caught when I read it have already been mentioned by several people. So that means that we're either thinking all alike and we're smart or.
We have groupthink.
Yeah, no, and I think it's very helpful, process to go forward to put together the next draft with it. And I'd be curious to see how the SE group reacts to a lot of what, we've said tonight, because they've worked on these documents before. So I want to make sure that if you had any more questions before we wrap this up, seeing that you're still working on the draft, to ask or to try to get further input on from the PC members. I'm going to continue to review it. I've actually taken the Word document and I'm putting in comments like track change comments, and I'll send you that document. And others can send in theirs however they feel appropriate, but hopefully it's easy to put all this stuff together. A lot of it's specific stuff that I don't want to mention. I just wanted to get a feel from the Planning Commission tonight exactly if we're going in the right direction and kind of the bigger picture of what this document is intended to do, and is it doing it? So.
Britt, can I ask you a really quick question? Is the next version, were we contemplating pretty version or is it still going to be drafty?
The next version will have like pictures, table of contents, that kind of stuff, so that it looks more realistic. You guys can get a feel of what the document's actually going to look like.
Close to the final.
Yes, closer to the final. And their presentation will really address where these changes have been made, kind of like how this is, but it's just going to look a lot prettier.
So they'll have sidebars and stuff like
Correct,
that in
yeah,
it. and-
yeah, so it'll be easier to kind of look at versus this gigantic
Okay.
document.
And so they're going to make a presentation then at the January meeting?
I did ask for them to make a presentation to kind of break this down a little bit for those of you who don't have all the time in the world to go through each page. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Is there anything in particular when we talk about that you want to see specifically? I know we've talked about a lot of things tonight, but, or format wise that you'd like them to show you or differently?
A PowerPoint presentation like the one that they gave to the public. We didn't really get that ourselves when they came and talked back to us, but I found that very helpful. And they went through and you could kind of see the bullets and have us have an opportunity to kind of give feedback, by section, I think would be great. But other than that, no.
Well, I just want to thank all of you for spending your time on this. I know this is dense reading, and I really appreciate the feedback you gave us. It's something we can act on. I don't think we got anything conflicting tonight, so I think Britt and I, our job is we just need to talk to the consultant and kind of wrangle this just a little bit more. And I'm really hopeful that this next draft you feel is reflective of this process and a document you can be proud of and work on in your time on Planning Commission. So thank you all for what you're doing here. I know it's not the easiest task, and we appreciate it very much. Having more eyes than 2 or 4, I guess, on it is way better.
Yeah. And as I said, I think the important thing is to make sure we're going in the right direction. Everyone seems to agree on that. And then it's a matter of, crossing the Ts, dotting the Is, and that sort of thing, which, again, the SE group should be pretty good at correcting a lot of that stuff too, so.
Question on downtown. Who's running that process, the downtown sub area thing? And then what's their timeline compared to
It
the
will
overall?
be consideration for adoption with this document. Britt and I today, I think it was either today or yesterday, we got the final draft version of that, and that will be you'll have that in front of you probably, I would imagine in January, we can do that. But I don't think we had a huge amount of concerns about it the last time everyone saw it. So I think it's really just making sure it's all good for the final process. So there's still an opportunity to make changes if we need to.
And it'll get dropped into here?
Yeah, it'll be just a section of the plan.
Okay, any other comments on this? If not, any other business, anything to be brought up?
I have one item of other business, just to mention that last night I attended the Nederland Historical Society meeting and just attended the section where they discussed the Gillespie House, since I had attended. And I want to just put out there that hopefully there'll be some committee to kind of form and keep moving forward the plans to rehab that building for safety. We established some priorities, and I think next step is going to be presenting costs and those priorities to the board.
Is that something they would come to the Planning Commission with first, perhaps, or?
I wrote to Britt just asking if there's any conflict of interest if I serve on that committee. I don't know how it works, but I also halfway volunteered Mike, and I don't know if there were, I said as a potential that he or I, or that we could team in a team way, one of us could kind of be present, but I don't really know how it works. So I think they are looking for guidance.
Well, I was thinking
from
if you
us.
wanted feedback from the Planning Commission, if they wanted to just do a quick presentation to us, that would be, it might be useful, helpful.
Well, if there's a conflict, the attorney's on the line right now.
There we go. We could also circulate the report that was generated. I don't know if the Planning Commission got a copy of that.
The original report, yes, and that's the one that Nicole asked for more data on.
Okay.
So because the board trustee is going to want to see more data. I think the point we are at now is staff also wants to do some contact with Boulder County. We think some funds should be coming from there as well. to really move forward. I think we've kind of just been finalizing budget and got a little distracted. But we can definitely make this a priority now and start working with you directly. I don't see an issue with that.
Great. And the timing is just because we have all the downtime now because it's not open to the public. So if we could get quotes and electricians in there and just some of that work done, it would be great.
Yeah, and I think we should definitely use like Nikki and myself, because we have a lot of these like local people we work with all the time to, start getting those quotes.
We
and
also,
getting working on that.
we do need to make sure it meets national park standards for the work. And that's something that I think staff can help with and we can work with Boulder County on. But we want to make sure that it's done so the building maintains a historical integrity.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, thanks for doing that. That's great. You know, that it's sat there for so long and people ask every once in a while, you know, what's ever going to happen there? And some people say, oh, well, it'd be a nice little coffee house for people waiting for the RTD bus or something. But it's just, you know, I hate to just see it disintegrate. So, okay, anything else?
I did have one, and I'm not sure exactly who would be the person to ask on this, whether it be Attorney Madsen or the staff, but it would be great, other than trying to figure out what the legislation is going to dictate to us for future land use and housing requirements. If we could get some kind of a present, once you guys know, I'm not saying, you guys need to do more work, but once you guys get the information, from DOLA or whoever it is that sends that stuff down, we would love to hear, hey, this is, the changes that are coming that we're hearing, and this is how it's going to impact future, building requirements.
Well, I love that you say that because I need people to go with me to CML, which is Colorado Municipal League, which regularly does legislative updates. And very soon there will be a kickoff since the sessions will be starting soon. They always do a kickoff session and then one midway through where they talk about upcoming legislation, things that are happening, things that we should hate like poison since we're towns and we think local control is the most important thing in the entire world, which is true. We should have local control. But that's going to be happening soon, and I'd be happy to reach out to this body when that goes. And, that's something I will be doing, and I'll invite the Board of Trustees as well. They also have a conference in the summertime that's super great if you're interested in those kind of legislative affairs. And then we will always provide updates. I've had, Cass has been going to a lot more meetings in the sustainability space, and Britt has been going to some. We've been working through some Dr. Cog planning meetings and things like that. So we can figure out a cadence that makes sense for that. And it probably would be, a good time is like June, July, like after the sessions are over and we can kind of recap it. But I think that would be a really great thing. Maybe if we do have we've been talking about a get together with all the boards, maybe that could be part of that, or we just do updates to each board or something. But
yeah, I thought they put out a summary document. Tom, you used to attend those meetings, right? Wasn't there
They do.
They do?
Yep, they do. And
Okay.
I'm happy to support in whatever way I can. But yes, CML puts out a summary of all the legislation that's been passed. That is a very dense document as well.
But I thought there was like an executive summary of that.
There is. It
Yep.
is. The executive summary is a dense document of all the
Oh.
legislation passed that affects municipalities. But related to planning and land use, that could be something that is whittled down to something much smaller. And, I'm happy to support in whatever way I can.
Okay, great.
there is a lot of the legislative bodies have been very interested in regulating planning at the local level. And that's been kind of happening for a couple of years. And CML has some concerns about that from a local control perspective, although a lot of the things that they're doing are things that we all agree on. So we just need to watch and monitor. And there may be points when we need to think about what the legislative is, what those bodies are doing and how we, what our policies are for interacting with them or anything like that. But, through this next session, we will be paying attention. We will also bring things to your attention if it's something that we think is really critical.
Well, I think it'll be very helpful to reframe our thinking. As we've talked about, hey, our town, as Roger was saying, for 40 years has been single family dwellings, and if some stuff's going to be pushed on us, the impact of it, it'd better to have us starting to think more towards what we're going to have to meet as we start looking at Chapter 16 and the different things. So any advance warning that Attorney Mattson knows, or anything that analysis that the staff has where, okay, this is going to directly impact us in these 3 areas, that would be great. And if you're inviting us to go to CML, my question is, the town going to pay for our hotel room? I don't think they have any money.
I mean, I'll get a big bed.
Oh, bunking, huh? All right.
You got volunteers going.
Okay. On that note, yes.
Real quick, obviously I've talked about her a lot. This is Cass. She's our sustainability coordinator. Wanted to come here tonight, kind of see how these meetings ran and get to know you guys.
Great.
You will see her more because she's just starting right away, finding all these great grants that don't require big matches, that work well with people who have the money. And so, yeah, I just wanted to make note that this is her. Feel free to come up after, introduce yourselves. And I think she's going to be chatting with a couple of you anyways. So, yeah.
Okay, great. Welcome. Thank you. Thank you.
You
for
came
coming.
from Grand Junction?
Yes, that was the last place that I worked. I was an AmeriCorps fellow working with their sustainability department.
Got it.
Thanks.
Good. Okay, well, it's before 9 o'clock. Not quite your record, Jim, but do we have a motion
We accomplished a lot.
to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
All right. Meeting ends 8:55.
Okay, thank you,
See you guys
everyone.
online.
Have a great evening and a Merry